Well, we're pretty excited to be here, and we've got two parts here for you, and we call it app management. I don't know what they called this session. Application, technical, that sounds pretty fancy, technical overview. But it's actually App Management 1 and App Management 2. We're going to hit you twice, from 2:15 and then again at 4. So it's going to be, we have a lot of content to cover. App management within ConfigMan 2012 is a huge piece of our people-centric strategy. It's one of the big investment areas for us in CM12, and we're pretty excited to be able to talk to you about it. It's a little challenging for the speakers. We'll have a half hour, pop some breath mints, get some water, and then we'll be ready for the next part. Dive right in. The first part that we're going to cover is essentially an overview of software distribution in ConfigMan 2012, and we're focusing on the application model. The new way of defining applications, deploying them to your users, getting your users the software they need on any device. So we'll talk about how you would create these new applications, how you deploy them, monitor the install, the success. We'll talk about user device affinity, which is one of the key ways that we can provide users applications in a way that really matches your administrator intent and gives you that confidence to be able to deploy to a bunch of users and make sure that the right forms of the app get to the right places for that person. We'll start out with some simple apps. We'll do some more complex rules. We'll talk about content and OSD, and then in part 2, we'll dive deep into some of the ways that you can create your own rules. We'll talk about some of the deeper relationships between applications, supersedents, things like that. So we got a lot to cover. We'll dive right in. Why do we have this new application model? Well, I look back at package programs, and it's a staple of SMS/configuration manager. It's been around a long time, a very reliable system. But in essence, when I really go and look at it, it's pretty much a glorified script execution engine, right? So you have some content, you have a command line, or any number of command lines that you can provide through programs, and then you will go ahead and run those to a collection of resources, and typically those are machines in CM07 and SMS 2003, et cetera. So the traditional model is essentially you as a company, as an administrator, have to figure out, because most of the time a user is someone that needs the software, right? So I have to get some productivity software to a set of users so they can do their job. So what I then have to do is I have to go and figure out all the machines where they might need it. Oh, okay, Brian has this desktop and this laptop, and he needs these tools. So I have to keep track of this user and the devices they have. Once you get that figured out, then you create a collection, you drop in potentially some direct membership rules for some machines, or you write some queries, you get those machines in a collection, and then you deploy the software. You'll probably get a message back saying, hey, I installed successfully, or I failed. And then the user, once that is successful, goes ahead, logs into their machine, and is able to do their job. But it's not the best system going forward, particularly when you have users with multiple devices, multiple types of devices, doing work from multiple locations, their home, kiosks, tablets, desktops, laptops. So what we really wanted to move toward in CM12 was a confident system where you can think about the users you're deploying to, and the system then takes care of the rest. That's the way we want to move. Now, I've been giving this presentation for a few years, and what's really exciting is this is the first time I've given this presentation when we've shipped. And apparently this morning there's an announcement we shipped. So it's pretty exciting. It's always been beta 1, beta 2. It's been early releases, so it's really exciting but typically in the early phases, when I talked about this new app model, some people were really concerned. Like, well, we're not quite ready for that. We have a huge investment in package programs. We've been packaging for a long time. We want to get there. We recognize the value, but it's going to take some time. Don't worry. Package programs are still a first-class citizen in CM12, and we have some migration tools that allow you to move those investments over into CM12, but we're hoping that you'll recognize some of the value of the app model and slowly make your way there to take advantage of some of the new capabilities. So when I talk about application model, I just want to walk through what that is at a high level. So if you go into the console, you'll see this new object type, which is an application. It's basically a high-level container for a number of pieces of information, and typically those are administrator properties. So who created this object, this application. maybe some categorization that will help you sort and filter and organize your applications. Then there's end user metadata. So in CM12, we have a much richer end user experience. We moved away from run advertised programs, which I thought was great. But we have some new tools. The software catalog, which is a way that users can go and search and find and install software that they need that you've made available to them. We also have the software center. And so you're going to need end user data associated with that application, like a friendly name, a description, some categorization for your users so they can search and find these things. Also, as global companies go, you're going to need different languages. So you'll need a different description for, say, German or French or so forth. So you're going to create end user data associated with this application. But applications, as a high-level kind of umbrella object, really become effective when you assign deployment types to them. And deployment types are essentially the workhorse for the application. So they contain this very important new concept, which isn't actually new to Configuration Manager 2012. We just never surfaced it before. And what I mean is that a detection method is some type of property that enables a system to determine whether or not software is on the system. Now, in the patching world, in software updates, we've been doing this a long time. Scanning systems with rich information. Thanks, Meyer. He loves software updates and detection.
Sorry.
We've been doing this a long time. Don't mute him, though, because we'll banter. So in software updates world, we do this a long time. Scanning systems, looking for the presence of applications, making sure that we can get those applications patched and revised, checking for applicability, right? So these concepts have been around a long time, but we've never had them in CM12 when it came to software distribution. But why not? It's an excellent way to go about doing things because it provides us a way to do state-based software distribution, and we'll talk a lot about that over the next couple sessions here this afternoon. As with any kind of installer, you're going to need a way to install, and you're going to have some parameters around that install, a command line and some options. That's true with MSI, with script, with a number of things. Where you don't have to worry too much about command lines is with our app virtualization, deployment types, and some of the others. But certainly with a script, which is essentially any command line or Windows installer, you're going to need to have that information in there. Requirement rules. So think of these as prerequisites. So system attributes, typically the Windows version, amount of physical memory, disk space, those types of things can be built into these application objects along with these deployment types so that we can make some smart decisions as to whether or not the software is appropriate to be installed and the system can handle it. Another feature of applications that we put a lot of effort into, particularly in the later parts of the development cycle, are the rich relationships. So first we had to build this app model, make sure we had the right definition, make sure that we got things right. Then we thought, man, to really complete the application lifecycle, you have to have relationships between apps. This app depends on these other two apps, or this app replaces or supersedes these apps. So to build in those rich relationships makes it that much easier for the system to do the right thing for you and on your behalf. All you got to do is think about those relationships up front and then let the system roll. And finally, content is required, right? You're going to have files and folders, and you're going to have stuff that goes along that you got to send out throughout your system in order to get the software on the devices. So here's just setting some context around features and CM07 and CM12. So when creating an application in CM07, you had the package program. In CM12, you have applications, which have associated deployment types, and those have requirement rules, detection methods, etc. To deploy an application in CM07, we have advertisements, and now we have what are called deployments. So funny, there's a feature here called compliance. I'm not sure I would really consider CM07 software distribution a compliance feature, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, you send out the package program, it runs, you may get a status back, but we're not really providing any kind of compliance. In order to provide compliance, you have to be able to analyze the system on a regular basis and know whether or not the stuff that's supposed to be there or not be there is actually there or not there, right? So we weren't able to do that with package programs very effectively. But when in CM12, we really bring the whole concept of compliance to the application or software distribution space. Is the app there? We use the detection methods to determine whether it's there or not. We place it on the system for the user that's appropriate. If it's ever removed, we will recognize that on a regular basis, put it back. So it's really kind of a state-based compliance system now, lining up with settings management, with software updates, with these other features that we've had. Targeting is all about who gets the application. For targeting in CM07, you had to not only target, but you had to worry about where it can run. So you have to create these collections of resources. You have to use inventory information, maybe to mix in some of your prerequisites, requirement rules, et cetera. So there's a lot of work that you have to do to define these collections. In CM12, it's all about who gets the software. You can put users and devices in a collection, but don't worry about the rest, right? If it's not there, we'll install it. If it's already there, we won't download a bunch of content and try to install it. If it doesn't meet the system requirements, we won't install. So those types of things are brought into CM12. User targeting, fraught with danger in CM07, because we had no way of actually setting up within the system whether or not the user should really get the software on any given device. So, a user logs into their desktop, they get Office, they get the tools they need, great. Laptop, sure. Log into a kiosk across campus, not so cool to download Office, right, and install it. Go on to a server to do a quick maintenance task, and they start getting software downloaded and installed. Also not very cool. So what we have is this concept of user-device affinity, where we can create a relationship between the user and their devices, and we can use those rules to determine whether or not to install software for a user. The client user experience, I kind of alluded to this earlier with my joke about how run advertised programs is so cool. It's actually terrible for accomplishing a really user-focused software deployment system. And in CM12, we have the software catalog, where users can go to install software that you make available to them. They can search, browse. We also have Software Center, where they can go to set certain properties about their system. They can do presentation mode settings. They can set up business hours. They can control kind of reboot behavior. They can also go to Software Center to see what's going to happen on their system. Hey, a bunch of patches are going to install, and they're going to install at this time, and we'll reboot. So there's a ton of new ways that end users can, if appropriate, interact with the client management system, which we didn't have before, in a positive way. Content management, really limited, but in CM12, so in CM07, limited. In CM12, we have this content library. We're efficient about the way we store content. We single instance store files, for example. We have a full in-console monitoring system that allows you to distribute content, view the success of the distributions out to your distribution points, and know what's going on with your content distribution system at any given time. So a lot of richness there in our content system. So I've alluded to this a little bit, state-based application management. Essentially, the system is smart enough to understand the state of a machine for a given user and do the right things. The detection methods are key to this, being able to understand what it means to see software on a system or to have software installed in a system. With a detection method, we can perform both installs and uninstalls where appropriate. We can regularly scan and enforce to make sure that the applications are there. We've got the applicability, the requirement rules that enable us to determine whether software should actually be installed on a system. And we do all of this on a regular scanning basis. It's state-based. In Config Manager 2007, I really can't say to you with a straight face that we have any kind of state-based or compliance system around software distribution. It's not a bad system, but it's not optimized for the direction that I know your companies are going. So with that said, we're going to start this whole party off with creating a simple application. We'll put a requirement rule so that you'll kind of see where we're headed with this, and we'll build upon this simple demo as we move through the next 2 sessions. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go in and I'm going to create an application. I'll do Adobe Reader. We use Adobe in a lot of our demonstrations. I was fortunate enough through the process of developing CM12 to build a very strong relationship with Adobe. When I started working on app management, I thought, what is a company that does a good job with their applications, has a solid customer base, good kind of knowledge of what it takes to deploy software, get it out to customers. They're a great example for modeling because there are some complex scenarios, particularly around upgrade from different versions. And so to build a relationship with that company was really helpful. We'd have regular calls. We'd say, hey, this is how we're going with our model. What do you think? Is this going to map to your vision of how customers deploy software? So it was a really great opportunity. And so a lot of times you'll see us use Adobe as examples because we know a lot about their products through our direct relationship with them. So the first thing I'm going to do is browse to Adobe Reader 3. I've got this content here. I have an MSI, and I'll go with English. So one of the things we can do is there are certain deployment types that we know a lot about, and MSI is obviously one of those. So we can pull a detection method from the MSI, which is a product code. We can gather information around the name. So we can pre-populate a lot of the information around Adobe because it's an MSI. If, of course, the wizard continues after I click Next. There. Excellent. Because if that doesn't work, then I don't gather anything and demo. I do a bunch of troubleshooting, and we don't want that. So Adobe Reader 9.3, we've got the product code here. We've grabbed the name of the application, and we've also grabbed the install behavior. This is essentially when you install MSI, you see install for user, install for system. We're grabbing that default information as well. So now I can augment that information. Here's kind of a standard default command line. I'm going to leave most of this as it is. I can add some information. The manufacturer's Adobe. I'll leave it at that, but you can see here's some of that administrator information I was talking about. And the application's created. Now this is kind of a one-shot deal because we could create an application and from that MSI create a deployment type that goes with it. Not always possible. You may want to create your application and then start adding deployment types as you build out that model. But here, with the simple import, I was able to create an app and an associated deployment type. Go into the properties of the deployment type, and we'll see I've got content. This is our install command. We'll pre-populate the uninstall command too. In a state-based system, you have to obviously be able to put software down and take it away. And so we've pre-populated that information that allows that. The detection method here. If you need something more complex, you can do that. It's a kind of an expression builder here. So we have a product code, but if you also have some concerns that the product code alone is not going to do it for your particular software, you can create an AND, this register key, and maybe this file and this version. So you can build out your detection methods into something fairly complex if you need it. Here's where I'll add requirement rules. I'll just add a simple one. What do you think, Meyer? Like physical memory?
Yeah.
Okay.
Operating system language. 1023.
So physical memory value greater than or equal to 1023. Okay. And there we go. I can add additional rules. We'll get into that in a bit. I'll also point out return codes. So we're a lot richer in the actions we can take based on information we get back, and it's all customizable. So I can put in codes for success, no reboot, hard reboots, soft reboots, right? And also we have the retry mechanisms. So you can add codes for when we should retry. If it's a transient error that you think for your package or the software that you're deploying, if you think that a certain code means it'll probably be fine in 5 minutes, we'll retry on certain intervals, and you can set those codes as well. I think we're getting into dependencies later, so I'll just leave all that go. And there you go. Simple app, created with a rule, ready to roll.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
You got it, sir.
Oh. What happened here? What is that?
That one.
All right, so dependencies. Brian spoke about that a little bit earlier. Dependencies are a very interesting and powerful concept within the application model. In order to install an app, if an admin can say, that if this app, if in order to install this app, I need to install or have certain components of an app on the system, like .NET Framework or IE, then you can specify those within this application model. You can have one-to-many relationships, or you can build n-to-one relationships within using this dependency model. The other thing is, to give you an example, let's say to install an LOB app, this LOB app depends on .NET Framework, and it also depends on Internet Explorer 8 and Internet Explorer 9, or Internet Explorer 9. So those are the things that you can specify as your dependencies. To basically allowing the admin to build out these complex relationships, that admin can really define an application and basically be successful at deploying these applications. So that's where the dependencies come into the picture. The other thing you can do here is dependencies are modeled as an application itself. So they can have their own detection methods, they can have their own requirement rules, and they can have their own dependencies per se. So the two ways you can use dependencies within the application model is you can configure as an admin whether to install this dependency app automatically when it's missing from the machine, or you can choose to just report that it's missing and then choose to act on it. Oh, dang it, I keep doing this.
What's really cool about dependencies is that the apps that where you create those dependencies, you're dependent on other applications. So each of those dependencies has its own detection methods, rules, requirements. So when apps depend on other apps, you really get the full experience for both yourself and your end users that you need.
So once we've created an app, the next possible logical step that an admin goes through in the workflow is to distribute the content. So with the Config Manager 2012, we have changed a content distribution in a pretty drastic way. Brian alluded to it a little bit earlier. We have created this content library, which resides on the Distribution Manager hard disk. It is a single instance store. By that, what we mean is if you have a file that is referenced by multiple content packages, we'll still only store one reference of that file on the distribution point for you. So we are efficient as to how we use the disk space. We have also, made it easy for the admin to distribute the content. We allow you now to create distribution point groups. Distribution point groups are pretty straightforward. You can have multiple DPs the distribution points that you can add to a particular group, or you can take those DPs and add them to multiple distribution point groups. When you target those content to those particular distribution point group, we will make sure that the content flows to all those distribution points within the group itself. We also made the distribution point wizard, which was available in 07, a little bit smarter. By that, what I mean is we have dependencies on the application model now. An app depends on another app that can depend on another app. And when you're deploying your apps out, you want to be successful at your deployments. And most of the time, the deployment fails is because content was not located on the distribution point. So with the new wizard that we've created, we will walk through the dependency list within the application, figure out all those dependencies, and make sure all those dependency content also gets distributed to the distribution point group. Similarly with task sequences. And task sequence, I believe John will cover at a length tomorrow in tomorrow's session if you're interested in doing that. So with task sequence also, we will walk all the references within the task sequence, figure out what content needs to be out there on the distribution point so that task sequence is successful when you're deploying it. And then we have added what we call a bandwidth control, which allows you to customize time and bandwidth utilization on distribution points, so you don't really need a secondary site if you can use the distribution point with the bandwidth control. So content monitoring. Previously in CM07, the only way to monitor content was going through the status message viewer. Now with the CM12, you can basically go into the in-console monitoring and look at your content per distribution point group, or even just for an app. So you can go into the app, click on into the software library, click on an app, and look at the content of whether it's successfully distributed to the distribution point, and you're good to go. We have also added a couple of controls per se on the distribution point properties page. We'll allow you to manually validate the content on the distribution point, or on a schedule, we will go through the hash check of all the files that are there on the distribution point and make sure they don't get corrupted. And if they are corrupted, we will alert you and we'll show you an experience in console monitoring so that this particular content is basically corrupted and you need to redistribute it to the distribution point. So that brings us to application deployments. This is very similar to what we had, what we used to call advertisements in System Center 2007. When you create an app, you deploy it, and that particular process is called deployment. Since Brian just alluded earlier that apps within the application model are state-based. So if we detect that they are not there, we'll put it back in there for you. Since they are state-based, once you deploy them to a collection, you do not need to deploy them again and again. One time is good enough for the collection, and you're good to go from there. So the deployment has other properties on it, like scheduling, alerts that you can fire off whether a deployment is meeting your particular expectations. You can show and hide notifications. And then there are certain intents on the deployment. That could be whether it's user-targeted or whether it's machine-targeted, whether it's made available or whether it's required. So if you have a user-available deployment, it's going to show up in the application catalog, and I'll show you a little bit later in the demo how that works. And if it's user-required or user-available, then it's going to show up in the Software Center. There are two actions on the deployment wizard. They are install and uninstall. There is another cool feature that we have with the deployment wizard, and that's what we call pre-deployment of software. So while deploying, if you choose to distribute this particular app as a pre-deployment, by that what we mean is using the relationship that we have created internal in the background, even if the user is not present on the system and this deployment targets the user, we would install this software while the user is still not logged on the machine. So when the user comes in the morning, on Monday morning, and looks at the system, we don't start installing this application first thing on Monday morning. The app is already present for him, and it's good to go for him. So before we get into the deployment, I wanted to give you a little bit more on how we actually evaluate a given deployment. So when an admin or when an end user actually selects an application to be installed from the application catalog, what we call the blue spinning circles or the donuts that we internally call them, during that time what we are doing is we are processing and assessing whether this particular deployment type is applicable on the system or whether it's even present. So first thing we're going to check is it installed? If yes, then we're just going to stop right there. If it is not installed, then we proceed further and see whether the requirement rules, the ones that Brian just created on the application, whether it meets the disk space, whether it meets the CPU requirements, whether it has the right operating system underneath it. All of those requirement rules and applicability rules will be evaluated at that point. If we meet those requirements, then we're going to continue. If not, then we're going to stop right there and report back those state messages, and that would be shown in console monitoring. The next step here would be to evaluate the relationships, and that would be the dependencies. Is this app dependent on another app? And if so, is that app installed? If that app is not installed, then we are going to go ahead, and if it's configured to be automatically installed, then we're going to go ahead and automatically install it. If not, and if it's already installed, then we'll just go ahead and install your app for you. So with that, we'll move into another demo.
Yeah, it seems so simple. If the app isn't present,
Did I make
or
it
it is, no. If the app is already installed, don't download a bunch of content, right? Don't download, 2 gigs of Office. I mean, with packaged programs, it's very hard to accomplish that. And so when we, first set out to build the app model, it was like the no-brainer. I mean, let's detect this thing with some lightweight, metadata, see if it's there already, and then don't do anything. I mean, I think it's just it's a huge progress for us that we probably should have taken a while back, but.
So let's go ahead and distribute content for the Adobe Reader 9 that Brian just previously created. I'm a right-click guy, so you'll have to bear with me. I don't normally use ribbons. I'll keep going to the right-click menu here. Distribute content wizard. It's for Adobe 3.9. As I mentioned earlier, this checkbox, which is by default checked, says detect associated content dependency and add them to the distribution point. And if you don't check it, then we're not going to do the thing that I just mentioned earlier about putting out all the dependencies on the distribution point. But with this thing checked, we'll just go ahead and detect everything. If it was there, then we would list it here, all the dependencies. We hit next, pick the distribution point group that we're going to target it to, hit next, shows the summary of it, and then we are done. Now, while this content is being distributed to the distribution point, what I want to show you is, let's go to the monitoring view and show you how this distribution point status looks. So you can see for each of these applications, I have previously deployed the content to the distribution point, and we would show them here as a success, in progress, failed, or with error. So apart from that, you can look for distribution point group status. It says that there are 16 packages available here. And here's the distribution point configuration. Let me pop back in here and look at the content that we just distributed for at OV3.9. And the content was distributed, so hence we are showing success with the content status inside of this console. The next logical step would be to deploy this particular app to user as user required. As Brian said earlier, this is a user-centric way of thinking. We're going to do user required, but we're going to build on the demos as we go along. And we're going to target it to all users collection for the demo's sake. The content's already distributed, so we'll just hit next. We'll make it required. And this is the stuff that I called out earlier with regards to pre-deployment of applications. If this particular checkbox was checked, then we would not need the user to be logged onto the machine when we install the software. We will just stay with the current time. These are all the other user experiences that the end user could see. You can play around with them and then make them behave the way you want them to. Here's the alerts page where a deployment, you can measure the success or the failure of a given deployment that you create. For the demo purposes, we'll just click through it. Summary, and we're done. With that, we will go to the client. And what I'm going to do next is, you probably guys have seen this, just for the sake of demo purposes, the client polls the server every hour. So the policy, the machine policy, or the user policy that we just created wouldn't float on for an hour or so. So we're just going to go ahead and kick the user policy cycle here. And within a few seconds, you'll see that the app is being downloaded and installed.
You said a few seconds. Mark, what's going on with this now?
All right, I lied. It's slow-moving software.
Think of a required install as essentially a push install. You're sending it out to your users or machines. It's going to install on a schedule, right? And the other intent that you saw up there was available. And when you do available, it's going to show up in that software catalog. Users, if they need the software, can go out and install it. If it's something that you said needs to be requested, the users can send a request out. And so that's the two different types of intents we have and the two different experiences you can expect. There are times when you need to push software and get it installed on a deadline. There's other times when you just want to make a bunch of software available, and if the user needs it, they know where to go, search for it, and get it installed.
That's interesting.
That was my filler, and now I've run out of stuff. Oh, see, we're on unidentified network.
Oh.
So we'll reboot the system.
No, hold on. Just gonna scroll up.
No, you're not on the.
Are you kidding?
Go up here. Here, let me take a look.
Okay.
I think we're not on something happened with our
Can you just ping?
network. Because this network, this is the Contoso
It's fine.
network.
Can you just ping from there? Oh, God.
Where are we? Oh, scrolling. No. Here we go.
Deployed, okay.
So, no, you're gonna. Here's what we're gonna do.
Oh, hold on. Can I just ping it?
Okay, you can ping it, but
Yeah, just give us a few
It's not on the
minutes.
same network. It's unidentified. So.
that's working.
Yeah, but that needs to say Contoso down here, okay?
No,
Yeah, it does. So what we'll do is we'll reboot the system, go back in the presentation, we'll come back in a sec. No worries. So you know what just happened? I'm going to explain exactly what just happened. I was standing over here. This is a true story. I was standing here thinking to myself, and I kid you not, this is the first time I've actually gotten to demo CM12 as a RTM. It's not pre-release. Normally when you demo, you're worried because it's a beta 1 or something, and you have a script, and if you click the wrong tab, the whole thing crashes. And I was sitting over here thinking to myself, this is really cool to be able to demo confidently a product that is released. Honestly, I'm sitting over here thinking that, and I'm like, you know what? The demo gods are going to do this something to me because the confidence I have, they're going to shut me down. And almost right after that, this happened. So that's life. So what we'll do is, that's a true story. I wouldn't lie to you. So we'll go back to the presentation. Once this system restarts, we'll double check to make sure we're on the same network. Let me just double check this. That's the last time I think while I'm standing over there. Let's just double check, make sure we're on the same network.
it's on the same network.
Okay, cool. So when this comes up, I'll bet you.
I
bet you we'll get a good shot at it. So let's go back to the presentation. We'll come check this out in a minute. What else did you have to do in that one?
Oh, that's it.
That's it? Just okay. So we'll go back in there. I'm betting it'll connect to that network. If it doesn't, we may have to pretend that all these things are deploying, but that's okay. We'll get to show you end user experience. We'll show you the server. We'll go from there. We'll play it by ear. So one of the keys to being able to deploy confidently to users, as I mentioned, user deployment in CM07 was fraught with danger in the past. One of the ways to be able to confidently deploy to users is to be able to define what systems are their primary systems. And that's where this concept of UDA comes in, user device affinity. So user device affinity is a way of creating a relationship between a user and their devices. And that's a primary relationship, not as a guest, not someone that logs in for a second. Okay? So we can base the relationship of UDA on a number of different properties. There's a number of different algorithms we'll run. There's logon attempts, there's not attempts, but successful logons. There's ways that you as an administrator can set this relationship. There's actually ways that the user can set this relationship if you allow them to do that. So there's a number of ways that we can set up this relationship. Once this relationship is in place, you can say, this user is associated with this device. Now, one of the big benefits that Meyer talked about was the pre-deploy benefit, whether it's through operating system deployment or whether it's just a regular distribution. Normally, in order to get software on a system for a user, they have to log in, and we have to evaluate the user policy, and then stuff starts happening. That's unfortunate when a user logs in and really wants to go do a specific task, and all of a sudden we're downloading a bunch of stuff and trying to install and slowing their system down. Then they call the help desk and like, my system's running slow, what's going on? And it's hard to manage. So with the pre-deploy config manager, the system knows that this user is associated with this primary device and can deploy software when the user's not there, not logged on. So it's a huge thing for us in a number of different scenarios for you, the customer. The other big advantage is that we can use this relationship as a rule on apps and deployment types. So for example, I want everyone to have Adobe Reader for being able to read PDFs. But if they're on their primary device, let's get them the full install. We'll download the MSI, we'll install it, great. If it's not their primary devices, if it's a home machine or a kiosk or something, we can either use like a Citrix Zen app, or we can do an app v deployment, something lightweight that doesn't really intrude upon the system and can be deployed very quickly and used very quickly. So using this primary device rule, you can allow the system to make some decisions for you and for your users that benefit them. So I mentioned how it can be set. There's a number of different ways to do it. We can do it as part of the operating system deployment. We can actually import a list. Like you have a CSV file and you want to import a list of users and their devices, we can do that. We can base it on usage thresholds. So this user logged in 10 times in the past 7 days. It must be their primary system. The end user can go into the software catalog and say, I want this is my primary device, check the box. We'll send that information back, and it'll set that relationship. Or you, on your end, as an administrator, can go ahead and set that for the user. I talked about the ability for the user to be able to set their own primary device. This is actually a setting that you can turn on or off. So if you don't want users to be able to do that, you can shut that down. And I think we're going to demo that, hopefully, in a little bit. So,
you want to kick that thing one more time?
Let's take a quick look. I will log into this, and I'm going to, while I was presenting, I was also praying to the demo gods not to.
You're doing two things at a time.
No, we don't do that. All right, here we go. Please forgive me, demo gods.
Don't worry about that one.
Oh. That's not cool. That is not cool.
Can you launch the CM catalog and see CM catalog? No, launch CM catalog.
Where's that?
Just go to the browser.
Browser. Is it already default?
Yeah.
Home?
And if we can go to CM catalog, that means it's working. You just need to scroll up. Just pick from the menu down.
What?
Yeah, just click here, and from the drop, that's freaking small. Okay, just pick CM catalog.
That one right there?
Yeah. Come on. No way.
Yeah.
Don't close it. Okay, you go and do the user device affinity.
I'm not giving up. We will try this one more time. I can do user device affinity. Shut down. Okay. I'll do the admin part of user device affinity, and then we will. Last ditch effort is we'll reboot both systems, making sure that this system gets up first. Then we'll bring up the client and we'll give it one last shot. But in the meantime, let's go to where are my client agent settings? Under administration, client settings. So here's where I'll show the client setting for allowing
User device affinity, bottom.
User device affinity. Right here for allowing users to define their primary devices. So when we get the client up, we'll show you in the catalog where that setting is. But right here is where you'll define whether a user can actually set that themselves. So I'll set that to true.
Device collection.
Where is it?
You can go to device collection.
Device collections. Device collections. We need users, right?
You can do all systems, show members.
I'm going to go to Melissa.
Yep.
Edit primary devices. So here what I can do is I can look at a user and see if they have any primary devices. So in this case, Melissa as our user has logged into Melissa PC 4 times. So if we have some certain thresholds we can set, maybe it was 10. I haven't checked the settings actually, but it might be 10, and then it would automatically create that if we allow that. So right now we don't have any device affinity. But because that I have now set in the admin console the ability for Melissa to do that herself, Melissa can go into the software catalog and she can set that. And then what will happen is you'll notice after that under the device, primary devices, you'll see Melissa PC as a primary device. Also, if I could simply, although this doesn't scale very well as an administrator, I could simply go in and add this manually and it would show up down here. But we're going to try to get the catalog up and running, and we'll make that happen. So I'll leave that open. Go back to the client.
No, to the Hyper-V. Oh.
Did I shut it down? Oh, now it's not even. Now it's not even shutting down. This is a bad VM.
Can we do one thing, Brian?
What? Go ahead.
So we can just snapshot it to this
Let me go
one.
back to the snapshot.
Yeah, and both of them. So do the client first, and then do the server first, and then the client. Yeah, do the server first. So we're gonna no, not that one, the part one.
This one?
Yeah.
Hold on.
We're just gonna snapshot our VMs to the last good known state, and hopefully that'll restore it for us. Do the other one too. Yep.
Fortunately, with the consumerization of IT, you all have phones and iPads, and so while we're doing this, you can probably check your email and things like that, which is great. And you can start blogging how these two jokers who were doing an app management session and their demos weren't working. So this is awesome. So we'll try to get this up and going. I just have a feeling that the demo gods will accept my apology and we'll get this working. But if not, I will direct you to some hands-on labs in Wally and get you doing all this stuff yourself. But until then, we'll bring that up. We did the user device affinity on the server, so we'll come back and get that client going. See, the client came up way too fast, though, without the server actually being there.
There you go.
Let's see if this one is.
You're fine. You're fine. You're in the catalog, my friend.
All right, but yeah, okay.
Don't worry about it. Just leave that alone. Leave him alone.
Oh, we got a catalog up and running.
No, hold on. Let the machine come up.
We're going to go back to the presentation. We'll wait for this stuff to all come up.
You'll have to redo the client agent settings, okay?
I'll redo that stuff. Fortunately, it's so quick to create an application that I can go create the Adobe Reader 9.3 in like a minute. That's how easy it is. All right, do you want to talk about catalog? Let's roll.
Sure. So when we deploy applications to user, there are two end user experiences that we would show you if this demo was working. But
don't give up yet.
hopefully the snapshots will work.
We'll get it going.
So there are two end user experience. The one that is an inbox Windows application that we call Software Center. And we don't believe that that's the place where the end user would go to get the software or interact with the system per se. The only way we believe that the user would end up being in the Software Center is if they were to click on the notification bubbles in the system tray when the software is getting removed or it's getting installed, and that's how they would go in there. That Software Center is basically designed to provide status messages. And we believe our customers and our admins would target the software to the users as available or optional software, and that would show up within the application catalog. So there are two, as we mentioned earlier, there are two ways of doing user targeting. Once, if you make it available to user, it goes to application catalog. If you make it required for the user, it should go into the Software Center. The other thing that we have is we've heard partners and customers building web catalogs in the good old days to make sure that the end user gets the software that they need right there and there. Application catalog that we built in System Center 2012 is basically that. What it allows you to do is gives you a rich browse and search functionality to go find the software you need as an end user, and then basically install it right there and there for the instant gratification. The admin can target the software or the applications to the end user, and only if that user is targeted with that deployment would the user see that app within the application catalog or Software Center. Or if the admin targets a group, then the user needs to be part of that group before you can see the software that's there. Now, if you're worried about end users going and installing software from the application catalog and you want to keep a control of it, we have built a very lightweight infrastructure on the back end that what we call request for approval. And it's pretty lightweight. What it allows admin to do is actually publish the software so the end user knows that the software is out there for him to consume. But then the admin controls the key whether to give permission for this user to have the software. And we believe that this is pretty fairly lightweight. Our customers probably have their own workflows with regard to the request approval process in form of service desk or service request workflow. So we have provided APIs on top of this application catalog feature that we built for the request approval that you can tie in your apps to do what you need to do to get to go where you need to go. So on-demand installation. So basically, the end user logs into the application catalog, and then makes and clicks on install for an application. At this point, we're going to reach out to the website with the application catalog. It's going to ask for the client ID for this particular client, and then goes to the client and then hands it over to the server. The policy created for the client ID and the apps hands back to the agent here. And then the website initiates the installation of the app. And then at the same time, we also would report back if there are any status messages that once the app is installed. So here we go again.
All right, we'll give it a shot.
So
I guarantee this is not going to install, though.
No, it was.
Okay, I'm going to trust you.
Do F5. F5.
F5.
Did that machine come up?
Yeah, but here's the thing. The IE was open on the snapshot, right?
Yeah.
Now it goes back to talk to the server. And the server is going to say, no, thank you. So what we need to do is literally we're going to do a shutdown of the client.
What, again?
Yeah. The snapshot came up, but it had been snapshot with browser open, right? So we looked like we had all our apps. But now when we go back to talk to the server, it's not going to be able to reload the application. So we're going to shut this down. We'll see if I can, one last time, get the network to get recognized. Server likes its network and is offering its services, and the client will hopefully come back. So let's see what else we have 100%. Then we can do all the demos at the end at once, which will be a lot of fun. Yeah. So benefits of multiple deployment types. So you saw when I created the Adobe Reader 9.3 that a deployment type was created automatically for that based on the MSI. But MSI, of course, isn't the only deployment type we support. And in fact, we've engineered the system in such a way that deployment types can be added in an extensible way, even outside of the regular product ship cycle. So this is partners can publish based on our schema their own new deployment types based on their devices, their platforms, their technologies they're offering. So we try to build the application model and the deployment types in such a way that it was extensible and available for partners. So we do have some ones that we created as Microsoft, MSI, the script, AppV. We've got some mobile deployment types. We also worked with Nokia, and they created deployment types for some of their devices. Citrix also has a XenApp connector, and it's under development. I believe at the State of the Union they showed some of that. It's pretty cool to be able to have a partner come in, understand our system, understand our schema, and write to it. So we expect that as new platforms become prevalent, there are a lot out there that we don't yet support, obviously, we can get those new deployment types in place and support them through our model like we do everything else. Some of the benefits, though, that I would talk about are you can create deployment types based on language versions. A lot of vendors, like Adobe, in fact, will create different packages for English and German and French and so forth. So you could actually have a deployment type per language and use operating system language rules to deploy the right language version to the right operating systems. A lot of times I see deployment types get created based on the processor architecture. So there's an x86 installer and an x64 installer. So you need two to go with your app. Your app is, Office and all of it's the suite. But to deploy it to an x86 system is a different set of binaries than x64. So there's different ways to split it out. Also different, like I mentioned earlier, flavors of deployment types, lightweight virtualized versions versus full installs based on scenarios of guests installing in kiosks and so forth. So there's lots of different reasons why you could have different deployment types and different benefits to using them. I want to talk briefly about AppV. That's one of our big deployment types. We've got some new features coming as far as AppV deployment in Config Manager 2012. Remember in CMO7 R2 we introduced AppV as a technology for the first time as being able to deploy and manage virtual applications, and we've incorporated AppV into our app model as a native deployment type. So you can actually create dependencies, this is pretty cool, based on different technologies. So an AppV app, which is a virtualized deployment, a virtual deployment type, can be dependent on an MSI or something else that might need to be deployed ahead of time, like the AppV client, for example. So we've got improved behaviors around updating. We're now able to selectively publish components within the AppV package. So before you get everything, you weren't able to kind of selectively choose the different applications you wanted to see published on a desktop. So here, if you go into Office, which I can demo because our server's up, I'll go in a minute, look at Office. I can show you how you've got all the different applications within Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and you can selectively choose which ones show up as icons on the desktop and which ones get published. We've done some performance improvements in CM12. Admittedly, CM07R2, we had some, we weren't as fast as native AppV in their server, right? Because you would log in, and a lot of times you'd have to wait for policy to get evaluated, software update scanning, things like that. All of a sudden, your icons show up in a minute or two. That's not the expectation with virtualized applications. The expectation is you log in, and bam, your stuff is there. So we've taken some performance improvements to make that happen in CM12. Software distribution on mobile devices. We have a few mobile device technologies, Windows Mobile 5, 6X, the Nokia that I talked about. So we've got some deployment types that support those mobile devices. You can deploy software to them, and we automatically do UDA associations with those devices. So there's some support for mobile devices, and I think the future is bright with Config Manager and new devices that come online.
You can do this one.
All right, let's see what we got here. I shut down this guy. We'll turn him on. This guy should launch pretty fast.
Office Communicator.
So I was going to show you the selective publishing. I'll do that really quick.
Yeah.
I think I have an AppV deployment. Yes, this is AppV. So if I go to the properties of an AppV deployment type, you'll see a few things. Not as many tabs. You don't create a detection method, right? Our system knows what the detection method is for an AppV app. It's a specialized application or package GUID. We know what that is. When we import an AppV package and create that deployment type, we know what to do. So you don't have to go copying, pasting GUIDs and creating your own detection methods. So we do that for you. We'll actually automatically import requirement rules from the package manifest. So there's operating system information in there, and we'll import those and automatically generate requirement rules for you based on the packaging of that AppV content. The selective publishing, obviously, Office has a lot of stuff that comes with it, and you may not want all this stuff to show up as shortcuts or get installed, or maybe you just want a few things, or maybe you're going to deploy this to just some business users and all they need is Excel. So no sense in publishing all the access and info path and those types of things. So we can go ahead and uncheck certain ones. And we couldn't do that in CM07 with the first integration. We can now. All right. The other thing we can do, there's an advantage that Meyer and I have here, which is we have a whole other session in about 15 minutes. We'll have a half an hour between the sessions. We get part 2, and we can modify that a little bit. And up front, if you come back, hope you do, we'll go ahead and start with, we'll get these systems fixed. It can be a bit finicky, and we can start part 2 with the demos from part 1 and go for it. But hopefully it doesn't come to that. But that's another option for us. Fortunately, we'll be here till 5:15, or unfortunately, we'll be here till 5:15, as the case may be. So, yeah, it's not going to like it. If we reboot this a few times.
It's not doing it.
Yeah, we'll shut down the server.
No, not now.
Well, not now. But what we'll do is
Just
we'll prep this, get this fixed. If you're back for part 2, I guarantee we'll have some demos for you. If I have to go to my room and get my laptop, which I know has some systems that are working, I'll bring it back here, we'll plug it in, we'll make it happen. I promise you that. So in the meantime, what else did we have to talk about?
No, just add the deployments for the multiple deployment. Do you want to do that?
Okay, sure. Here's what I can do in the last few minutes is I can add multiple deployment types. I can show you that. One of the things I can do that for is Communicator.
The Office Communicator.
Office Communicator. Do we have that in here, or do you want me to create?
Oh, it's got a second scroll bar. Dang it.
It's not in here. So what I'll do is I create an app. MSI or an XE? Based on Office Communicator 2002. You can see I have a number of different options here. I have an XE, an SFT, and Windows Mobile. So what I'll do is I'll switch this up. I'll start out with App V. That'll be nice. We haven't shown an App V import. Go back here, go to right there, thank you. Office Communicator. Here's SFT. We're going to look at the package manifest. That's the file we're going to read in. It's got to be a UNC path. Change that up. There we go. I'll leave all the properties there and very quickly create this Office Communicator. I think we're getting messed up. It might have already been there. So here's Office Communicator. Here's the one I created. Look, it wasn't there. I missed it. Rattled because my demos aren't working. But this is an actual exact copy of Office Communicator with a new application GUID. It could be deployed separately. We'll just go with this one. I will add a deployment type. And this time I'll create a mobile. Do that.
Base server 01. Demo
stuff. Software. I can go and add an additional one.
Just pick one, yeah.
Either one. Create next. Choose the defaults. Here's where I could add some requirement rules. What's interesting is here it'll filter the requirement rules based on the mobile platform. So here we could do free mobile device memory and set that up. So you're not going to see like operating system version and things of that nature. I won't go ahead and add that now. Create next. And then the third one I'll add is the script type. So a script installer requires a little bit more work on the part of the person who's creating the app model. So you will create your own, you'll use your name. We can't pull any of the information directly from a script. We don't really know the format. We don't know the nature of it, not like MSI or App V. So you can create script one, communicator, XE. Go to the content location. Demo stuff.
What are you looking for?
Browse that.
There is no XE.
I saw an XE there.
That link 2010 has an XE. That's an MSI, actually.
It's an MSI.
Yeah.
In an XE folder.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
Sorry.
Well, fortunately, it'll be faster. Demo stuff. Office. Communicator. Oh, look at that. Well, this will make this a lot faster. Because I was going to go into the registry and try to find, you know, the detection method, and it was going to be a fun time. But here we'll automatically pull in the MSI and all the data. We'll have 3 different deployment types. And once again, I've done this before. You saw this a little bit ago. We could add some requirement rules. And go ahead and complete that. And we're done. So we've got 3 different deployment types based on different technologies for the same application container. And so you can get, like I said, pretty creative with that, whether you need different types of languages, whether you need different platform types, whether it's processor architecture, the number of ways you might want to slice and dice creating deployment types for your applications. Bring that out. We won't be able to do any more client demos until I get that fixed, so we might as well shut this down and bring it back up in a little bit. A few more slides to show you. You going to take it?
Yeah. So applications, UDA, and task sequences. We touched upon all these three topics earlier. What we want to let you know is we built task sequence only specifically to deploy operating systems. We really do not encourage our customers and our admins to go deploy apps using task sequence. I understand a lot of you do that. But here are some of the reasons why we believe that the application model that we've created, it actually works the way you would want it to work. So some of the things that we hear as a feedback is, do we go down task sequence and deploy apps through there, or do we do it through app model? And our reasoning is, yeah, please go ahead and use app model. The reason is following. Because the apps are actually optimized to be user-targeted, whereas task sequences are optimized or still are targeting machines. And when you actually do create, apps also have what we call the state-based stuff, which is requirement rules and detection methods, which can be automated and persisted on the system. If you're going to do those relationships using task sequence, you will have to build them every single time you build a new task sequence. The app model also provides you, if you're deploying apps through the app model, it will provide you a rich monitoring experience, why it failed, whether it succeeded, what requirement rules failed, why did this not install because the detection method was not created appropriately, or it was wrongly created, or whatever. So these are the things, these are the reasons why we believe that apps should be deployed using app model versus the task sequence. Even after, we believe we built 80 to 90% of the stuff that you may need day to day in order to manage your state-based apps. You can get those done using the application models. If you need something more than what we already have, we encourage you to look at the packaging tools that might be at your disposal, or some of the PowerShell or at the PowerShell stuff. So if you want to still deploy task sequences, here's a real cool bit about deploying apps through task sequence, and that is, as Brian mentioned earlier, you can set the UDA, the user device affinity, as part of the task sequence process. And when you do that, if you're targeting user-required apps, then you can install those after the task sequence finishes. And the way you would go about doing it you would deploy these apps to the group of users, flatten your box, run the task sequence on it, the OS gets installed or laid onto the machine, and then it gets handed off, and then we'll pre-deploy those user-required apps. You would use the pre-deployment feature here, because the user's not logged in while the task sequence just got done. So we would pre-deploy those apps and then hand it over to the user to do his normal thing. That is his job. In summary, what we've seen, except for the demo, sorry about that, guys. We will get to that in the break here really soon. We've seen the application model. We touched upon all the big, they are state-based, there are requirement rules, there is dependencies there, and we'll get into the other important area, which is the uninstall part of it, the supersedence part of it, and the next part is the simulated application deployment, which we'll get into the part 2. With that, part 1 is done.
So we really appreciate your time.
Really appreciate you hanging in here.
Thank you for not leaving. How many of you are coming back for part 2? Okay.
Thank you.
Here's what I asked. There's a slide coming up that says fill out your evaluations. Wait until after part 2. If we get the demos up and running and we show you this stuff, maybe you'll give us a shot. So we'll see you back here in about a half an hour.
Give us half an hour.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.